Thank you, John, and thank you, everyone. I think this has become an annual ritual that John pulls me up here to give this award, and the Frank Boergher Award. Let me start by asking those of you who knew Frank Boergher, please raise your hand. Looks like about 7% of the room. So that's the sole reason I'm here. Frank Boergher was one of the founders of the Bay Planning Coalition. He and Charlie Roberts and I and a handful of others, John Jacobs from the San Francisco Chamber, met in 1982 at the Seawolf Restaurant, which is today Scott's, and we put it together. Charlie was our first chairman for 3.5 years. Frank Boergher then took over for 4 years, Boerger, and then I was to take over on July 17th, 1990. Frank Boergher was a towering citizen. I'm going to follow Isaac's lead and not tell you what's already in your program, but omitted from there is much mention of his military history. He served in World War II, went to West Point, which is there, served in Korea and in Vietnam, and became just a powerful voice of balance and reason, a great citizen of the Bay Area. He gave so much of his time, and the Bay Planning Coalition was just one example. So we all loved him. He was like a big brother, as was Charlie. And on July 17th, we had a board meeting at the Port of Oakland, and this was going to be the formal vote where the gavel was going to be turned over to me. And I was asked to make a few remarks about Frank. Well, I've been to a couple of funerals of late, and you know how those are, especially when it's a man who was your friend. And I was reflecting on the fact that all too often, a man says what he really feels about a dear friend or relative who happens to be another man only on one occasion, the occasion of that man's death. So I said, I don't want this to happen. So I'm going to say what I feel about Frank, what everybody in the room feels about Frank, as if you were passed, and I'm going to be somewhat unabashed. I loved him, as all of us did. And this big Welshman who had played tackle at West Point for the Black Knights of Army, all of a sudden tears started coming down his one cheek. I was standing right next to him, and I thought, my God, I'm going to embarrass the living daylights out of him. So I reverted to the wise ass I normally am, finished the award, we toasted him. I was in the middle of trial in Fresno, I think. I drove back to Fresno, and it was after court the next day that I got the phone message that morning, July 18th, Frank died in his sleep. At our next board meeting, we were stunned, of course, but we thought, he was an absolutely exemplary citizen of the world, a soldier, a statesman. He had been district commander of the Corps of Engineers from 1969 to 1970, from 1966 to 1969, 69 to 72, Charlie Roberts was. He had served on the first BCDC when it was created in 1965. He was a mentor to all of us about giving back to the community. He was respected by all of the agencies, and so we established the Frank Boergher Award in his honor, which we have given every year. Past recipients include, of course, our longtime executive director, Ellen Jonk, who is table 9. There are too many to mention because we established it in 1991, but others included Sonny McPeak, Bob Tufts, and so on. And into that august company, today we're giving the Frank Boergher Award to a man who certainly fits the mold of not only past recipients, but also of Frank himself, a 1972 graduate of Stanford Law School, distinguished senior partner at Wendel, Rosen, chairman today of BCDC. As long ago as 25 years, he was already, as a relatively young man, on the board of port commissioners in Oakland, a member of so many good causes and charities in the Bay Area, a role model for everybody, and a very close friend and confidant of our governor, who bears the same name as a guy who was elected governor 40 years ago this year, but they're completely different people, I'm sure. In any event, would you please give a nice round of applause for Zack Wasserman, and I sure hope he's here. Where is he? Congratulations, Zack.
Thank you, buddy. Thank you very much, John and Bay Planning Coalition. I am indeed very honored today to join the ranks of the other Bay Area leaders who are trying to follow in the footsteps of Frank Boergher. This award is a recognition of some of my efforts, but I think it's at least as much, if not more, a recognition of the excellent staff and strong commission at BCDC, whose support allows me to be effective in dealing with the often difficult balance between protecting our Bay and its natural resources and promoting and supporting economic development and economic vitality in the Bay and along its shores. I want to thank in particular my wife, Meg Zweiback, who is here, who makes everything I do possible. Thank you. In certain ways, I feel a newcomer to the planning efforts in the Bay. I've only been chair of BCDC for 2 years. But as John mentioned, I do have some prior history. I was on the Oakland Port Commission back in the late 80s in the midst of the dredging wars that Barbara Lee talked about earlier this morning. As people say, in that struggle as well, I helped. I want to talk a little bit about what I think this honor means, because in truth, I believe it's much less for me about what I've done in the past than what I am doing now and hope to do in the future, and the struggle that I hope you will join. I believe the most important challenge we face at BCDC, not the only one by any means, but in many ways the most important one, is how we adapt to rising sea level. As John Englander said, as we have read in the headlines and photos in the last few days, about the melting ice sheets, rising sea level is inevitable. If we were totally successful in combating greenhouse emissions, and we have not been, and we need to do more, if we were totally successful, sea level would continue to rise, inevitably. Indeed, as they say, come hell or high water is coming. Indeed, well, some of you have heard me talk about these things before, and some of the words will sound familiar to you, some of them will be new. But we're engaged in a campaign, and I think all of you know that good campaigns are in significant part about efficiently repeating the message. And so there will be some repetition. This campaign we envision as a 5 to 10-year campaign to figure out in the Bay Area, looking around the world for models, looking to ourselves as well, what we can do to adapt to rising sea level, what we should do given difficult priorities and understanding as much as we can unintended consequences, and how we're going to pay for what we need to do. At BCDC, we have a working group on rising sea level, and we have been meeting with representatives of industry, of public agencies, of insurance companies, of educators, and both political and financial consultants to address all of those issues. We are not spending much time on science. Certainly research is continuing and needs to continue, but we know, as John talked about, as we read about, whatever we study, whatever we do, sea level is going to rise. It's going to rise at least 3 feet and more between 2050 and 2100. And so we're focusing on what we need to do to adapt to that inevitability in order to protect our airports, our roadways, BART, our rail tracks, our utilities, and power plants that are near the shore. If we were here sometime in that period, for sake of argument, 2075, and some of you will be, we wouldn't have water here, certainly not up on this stage. You wouldn't have water there. But when you went outside or on your way in, at street level, you would need big galoshes or maybe even pontoons. That lake is connected to the ocean. It's connected to the bay. When the bay rises 3 feet, that's going to come through. It's going to have an effect on all of us in places we don't think about and we don't fully understand yet. I want to take quick note of 3 of the activities that we are engaged in and one other. We're in the process, in conjunction with the Joint Policy Committee, of cataloging the efforts that have been going on around the bay, the projects that have been done and are in planning to adapt to rising sea level. And to take from those the 10 or 12 best models that we think we can learn from so that we can look at other places to apply those same lessons. And some of those candidates include the San Francisco Creek effort, which is a major effort interregional on the South Bay. It includes the Adapting to Rising Tides project about vulnerability and what we can do to address it here in northern Alameda County that BCDC is sponsoring. It includes the Napa River Flood Control Project. Some people who were very thoughtful going back probably almost 15 years and doing a very important project. There are many more examples. Second effort, to identify nonprofits and programs that are focusing on providing education in K through 12 about climate change and adaptation to rising sea level in particular. Why are we doing that? As you may recall, our national campaigns to address smoking, to support seatbelts, to make us recycle, had a significant part of their success because we educated in the schools, in the classrooms, and those kids came back and taught and nagged their parents to do what was right and what needed to be done. We hope we can model some of that success, and it is a long-term campaign. That's why we need to focus there. Third, as most of you know, there's a current effort by the Bay Restoration Authority to put a parcel tax on this November's ballot to raise funds for restoration throughout the Bay. That is not focused primarily on rising sea level. And why isn't it? Well, there are probably many reasons, but one of them is because that education effort has not yet taken place and is not yet successful, and rising sea level will not motivate people to vote yet. In the future, it will. But that measure is still very important because it will provide, again, an educational campaign in the context of persuading us of what we need to do to protect our marshes. And those marshes and wetlands are, in fact, a very important part of adapting to rising sea level. They are horizontal seawalls that act as sponges and will be important in a wide array of places around the bay. So I offer you an opportunity. It requires $1.5 million simply to get that measure on the ballot. And the Restoration Authority doesn't have any money. So we are reaching out to people to contribute to that effort simply to get it on the ballot. And if you have any interest in that, I urge you to talk to me or others connected with BCDC and the Restoration Authority. And the good news is, unlike most political campaigns, that contribution is tax deductible because getting it on the ballot is for a government purpose. I want to talk very briefly about a fourth item that is not in our control but gives me a little bit of hope. There are a range today of books and articles coming out about companies and people profiting from climate change. don't get distressed, don't get your backs up. Capitalism actually has some benefits. And as people think about ways they can deal with the inevitability of climate change, including rising sea level, and make money about it, it makes it a realer issue. So one of those books is called Windfall, and I encourage you to look at it. It's got some very good examples. It too is going to help inspire us. I want to close by asking you, indeed challenging you, to join us in this long-range campaign to address the very slow-moving emergency of rising sea level. We have time to address this, but if we do not act, we will lose that time, we will lose that opportunity, and we will be underwater with no way of protecting ourselves. So I leave you with a few words that are on my website from Rabbi Hillel that have broad application, but I think they apply to this campaign as well. If I am not for myself, who will be for me? If I am for myself alone, what good am I? If not me, who? If not now, when? I thank you very much for this honor. I encourage you to think about the issues that we've talked about today and we'll talk about this afternoon, and to join in our campaign.
Zack, thank you very much. Zack has been instrumental. He underplayed how involved he's been in our community and on the issues throughout the years. And without Zack's perseverance and intellect, a lot of what's been accomplished here in the Bay would not have happened. Now we're going to do another award. This award is new. The Executive Board approved the award at a meeting recently, and it's called the Charlie Roberts Lifetime Achievement Award. Now Charlie Roberts was the first founding member of the board of the Bay Planning Coalition. Unfortunately, he did pass away this past year. He was with the U.S. Corps of Engineers at the San Francisco District Engineer. He's also the executive director of BCDC at one point in his life. This award will not necessarily be given every year, but it will be given to somebody who's just outstanding in the community and who's well deserved of the award. And I'd now like to ask John Briscoe to please come up here. And John does not need an introduction. What's the award? It's also a lethal weapon. Don't go on a plane with it. Oh. So you just under 10, okay?
Under 10?
Yes. We have a congressman waiting.
Oh, John?
No.
Paul? You've never seen this, have you? Shepard is in disbelief. He's, I am in disbelief. This is an extraordinary honor. Many of you know that Charlie Roberts was also very dear to me, and I was asked by the family to speak at his memorial service last fall, and then John also asked for me to speak about Charlie at our annual membership meeting in December, and it was difficult. And to be so honored has me about as close to speechless as I've ever been in my life, and it's just been terrific all of these 42 years since I started doing the kind of work we all do, to have worked with all of you in the agencies, at the ports, private industry, all the friends, wonderful friends that I've made. I am speechless. Thank you so much.